politics of fear and hate are wrong. We love you and politics of
But America,
and love are right.
we are not going back.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Raise Red Living Blue podcast. I'm your host, Jason Will. Got an exciting guest today. My first Republican guest in the history of the podcast, Case Dixon. Case, thanks for doing this.
Jason, I really do appreciate you inviting me.
Thanks for trusting me with this. I have been trying to get anybody from the red team to come on this podcast since
Reached out to several.
Yeah, and maybe having you on, depending on how this goes.
Sure. Well, look, I can tell you this. Look, so I thought about it when you first reached out. I was like, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? I don't want to do anything that hurts the campaign.
Right.
But then I thought, I got to put my money where my mouth is. I mean, if I'm going to, say certain things or say, hey, look, I believe in this, I should be willing to defend that. And regardless of whether you're on the left or the right, any idea should be able to stand on its own two legs. So.
Well, yeah, and then I look at it this way. I think we've gotten, so partisan. You don't have to look farther than Tuberville. Like he's basically come out and flat out said like he's going to be the governor for Republicans. Mm-hmm. He's not really the.
Not seen that.
He's not really. Well, I'm taking out of context a little bit.
Like I know what you mean. There's folks that act like they're only there for either Democrats or Republicans.
Yeah, and I just feel like, hey, if you're elected to, especially an executive office, like you're the politician for all people.
Right.
Like you're the governor for all people.
Right.
And, I vote Republican all the time, because a lot of times we don't have a quality, Democratic option, or there's no, they're running unopposed or whatever it is. And
so would you say you're more of a swing voter?
Yeah, I mean, I try to really vote for who I think is going to be the best candidate. I think, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I did not feel, I was upset. We didn't get this in depth into it, but I probably, if Nikki Haley would have won the nomination and Biden would have stuck in the race, I would have voted for Nikki Haley. I really feel like we are ready. Well, we're not ready. We really need, I really am a big proponent of female leaders. I want more female leadership in state, local, federal levels, and was a big fan of hers, but it just didn't work out that way. But I was, really disappointed that Biden wasn't a one-term president like he said he was going to be.
All right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was a disqualifier for me. So,
sure.
Yeah, so I just try to look at the candidate and not what party they're with. And a lot of that probably comes from the fact that I've spent, half my life as a Republican, and now this second chapter is as a Democrat. But let's focus on you. Just tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are. I do want to talk about that you're a young guy.
Yeah, sure.
So give us a little background on Case Dixon.
Sure. I've always grown up in Alabama. I grew up early part of my childhood in the Maline, Alabaster area, there till I was about 10 years old. We moved to the McCalla area, and that's where I ended up meeting my wife. We've now been married coming up on 3 years this December. We have 2 kids. We have a 20-month-old and a 5-month-old, 2 girls. So yeah, it's been busy for sure, especially since the campaign, because started running really getting things moving in March, and then so then we turned around and had a birth in June. So it's been full steam ahead for sure. Yeah,
and you're having to spend so much time on this campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And she's really having to pull double duty at home. So
yeah, oh, absolutely. She really is a trooper, honestly. I mean, she does a lot, and it just grows by the day. But I couldn't do this without her for sure.
She believes in what you're doing.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst that got you not only in this race, but even thinking about it, like even a blip on your radar?
Sure. I think like a lot of people, I think during COVID is whenever I really paid attention. I mean, I've always, let me just say, when I turned 18, I registered to vote, I think probably the day I turned 18.
Yeah.
My family's not just over the top political as far as, involved in, I guess, the establishment, but everybody votes, everybody's very opinionated in my family. And so that was ingrained in me. But then whenever COVID happened, I really became more acutely aware of the importance of getting involved. I was not a fan of the lockdowns and the mandates and the fines and the things that were involved with the federal government, with the stimulus checks leading to the inflation that we're seeing today. And so that's when I realized I need to get involved. But at that time I was in college, wasn't married, didn't have a stable job. I was working part-time. And so when the government opened back up and school opened back up, I finished my degree. And I have a degree in physical therapy assistant. So I have a 2-year degree from Jeff State. So I work as a physical therapist assistant now. But that was in 2021 is when I graduated. And then that's also the same year that my wife and I started dating. And so all of the feelings that I had during COVID got put on the back burner. Mm-hmm. Well, then fast forward, my wife and I, we've been married a couple years. We have our first daughter. That brings back up those same feelings that I had during COVID as far as the need to be involved and the need to really shape the future that my kids are going to grow up in. Because those feelings were there, but now fast forward, I'm in a better place in life. I've got a stable job. I've got a home. We're married. We've moved on to having kids. And I thought, look, if I don't get involved for the sake of their future, what am I doing this for? I feel like that's what I'm on this planet for, is to, be a godly example and raise my children and prepare a good future for them so they can do the same.
Wow, that's pretty good. Pretty good answers there. I love it. Well, so let me ask you this. Do you have any Democrats that you can, off the top of your head, in your family, or is it pretty solid red?
No, I'm sure some extended family, not any immediate family, but if I go down the list of like cousins and stuff, I'm sure somewhere down there's some Democrats.
Did your parents try to talk you out of this at all? Like, did they go, hey, Case, this is going to be a lot?
No, and I think even like myself, you never know what is fully involved in something until you really just go head first and you just have to, experience it trial by fire.
Yeah.
My parents are very supportive, for sure. My wife obviously had reservations as far as being in the public eye and things like that. But ultimately, she's on board. She trusts me, and she knows that it's for the betterment of the state of Alabama, our kids' future, our future, so on and so forth. So.
Yeah, and you're different, I think, in that you're not a status quo Republican. You feel like you don't feel like everything is great in Alabama.
Yeah, as far as, yes, in the fact that I think that many times we see folks that are just looking to, how can I gain this power? And so they just cling to whatever is popular. And there's principles that I think we have to adhere to as conservatives. And so that's where I would put myself as far as adhering to conservative principles, not necessarily individuals or personalities. And I think that's what we're missing a lot of in politics right now.
Yeah. So is it fair to say you're a traditional Republican?
I would say...
Versus a MAGA Republican?
I would say, honestly, no to that. I would say constitutional conservative.
Okay.
Because, I'm not on board with folks like Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham. I don't know if you would consider those traditional Republicans, but I'm also not on board with folks that are just going to rubber stamp whatever the president does. Because I think Mitch McConnell or Lindsey Graham, and I'm not just singling them out. I hate to single out specific people, but just even those folks, I would say, are to the left of maybe even Trump. I would say I'm to the right of Trump. But it's a weird dynamic right now, because I think right now it's been reduced to many times, like you said, it's so polarized. It's just, are you a Trump supporter or are you not? And I think, and that's not just within the Republican Party. My viewpoint is many times it's just either you like Trump or you don't. But it's so much more diverse than that.
It is. But, Trump...
And I'm not saying I don't like Trump. Let me preface that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying all that to say I don't like Trump. There's some things that he does that I like and I am on board with. And there's some things that he does that I am not on board with. And I could say that for anybody. I don't know if there's anybody that I would ever wholeheartedly 100% agree with. But I don't think that means you should not have a voice in the movement or in politics, but specifically the Republican Party. I think right now anybody that dissents from the president is catching a lot of backlash, even if they are to the right of him. When you take, for example, Congressman Massey or Senator Paul, those are folks that I would say I'm very closely aligned with ideologically, and many times they catch the ire of the president and they're being called rhinos. And I'm looking and saying, look, they're to the right of the president. So I don't understand how we're going to say these folks are Republican in name only when they're actually more conservative.
Yeah. Well, and two, you kind of, I think, brought this up, just maybe skated over it a little bit, but it seems like a lot of these politicians today, it's about celebrity. Like they want to build their following, build their fame, use it to propel them financially, professionally. Not necessarily. They're not people focused,
Right.
constituent focused.
Right. Right.
And so I think if you're going to be somebody that is a true representative of the people, I don't think you can be a rubber stamper. And you certainly don't want to be or have one of your main goals to be a social media influencer or whatever it is, to have a huge following in that area. But yeah, I mean, you see it on both sides, the rubber stamping and, the failure to criticize. I mean, I think one could argue that was something that really hurt Kamala Harris, is that she wasn't critical of Joe Biden. She had so many opportunities to go, yeah, that was, we could have done a lot more on the border, but she missed those opportunities, and it came back to bite her. But you are a self-described working class guy, right? And so I wanted to dig a little deeper on your working class experience and how that shaped your view of government and maybe differentiates you between your opponent, Gary Palmer.
Yeah. And, I've read Gary's bio. I know kind of his history, and I know he came from a working class background also himself. But I think that really ties into part of my campaign platform, which is the importance of term limits. I mean, I think the longer that you stay removed from your average constituent, the less likely you are to realize the daily struggles that they face. And so I think it's important that we do have turnover in offices. That way, folks stay close to the people. They understand what they're dealing with. I had somebody not too long ago, they asked me, well, how are you going to understand, I don't remember the exact question, but paraphrasing here, how are you going to appeal to the average voter in the 6th congressional district? And I was like, I am the average voter. I mean, I make the median income that is in the district. I make $75,000 a year. I understand what it's like to, deal with inflation or to, have to cut back here or there. And like I said, it's not to say that Gary Palmer doesn't know how to do that or hasn't dealt with that. But I think that whenever you've been in Washington for 12 years, trying to go for 14 years, you start to lose touch with the people that you're supposed to represent.
Well, and the other thing I see is just the age. Like, I just feel like if you're over 70, you probably need to, let a younger generation. I mean, if you're in a certain age range, tax bracket, you tend to think, act, and maybe even develop policies for those same people.
Right.
And there's just not enough people your age. I mean, I'm thinking about, you 20, 40 years from now, some of these policies that these politicians are enacting are not going to serve the Case Dixon 20 to 40 years older than he is today.
Well, I feel like many of the policies, to your point, they're not going to see them to fruition. They're not going to see the consequences or the benefits associated with these policies. And so I think that you need a Congress that truly is accurate to the diversity of America as far as specifically in regards to age. Because folks like me, there's little to no voices, especially on the right. Democrats, I think, inherently just based off of the ideology of the party are being a bit more progressive, are a bit more open to younger folks coming in. But the Republican Party specifically, I think, is very kind of wait your turn. And that's great in some aspects, but in other aspects, I think that folks that are my age and even a little bit older, into their 30s, they're not represented. And so we don't have representation in Congress that knows what it's like to be someone my age in America right now. And I think that's important.
I could not agree more. So this is, it's a huge leap, I think, to go from, concerned citizen, dedicated Republican, dedicated to your principles, to, mounting a run for Congress. Have you had to make, you're sacrificing time right now. You've been working all day, but besides like home life, what other sacrifices have you had to make to, make this run for Congress?
I would say time is the biggest one. I know you kind of touched on that, but ultimately time, I think, is your biggest commodity. And especially when you've got young kids, time away from them. And thankfully, the district's not so large that I can't be home every night. But,
yeah, that's a good point.
Many times I get home and they're asleep or something like that, because especially if I'm down in Wetumpka, I mean, that's a 2-hour drive back to Jefferson County. So, but yeah, I mean, even when I do get home, even if I get home early, you know, I'm up working on, you know, policy stuff, doing stuff with the website, social media, whatever it may be. So it just takes a lot of time.
Any backlash? Like, has your wife had to deal with anything? Any
No.
safety concerns? Anything like that?
Not at the moment. Not at
Yeah.
the moment.
I know you got to have some thick skin. You know, maybe as things kind of heat up, the deeper we get into this, you know, there could be some mudslinging involved. So we are probably a little bit premature for all that. But, you know, it can just get nasty.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. Yeah, I've seen politics does not bring out the best in people for sure.
It doesn't. But I think, you know,
People just get so dogmatic sometimes whenever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why part of the reason why I wanted to sit down and do this conversation, because I mean, I think it's important to remember that not everything is as polarizing as it might look online sometimes. You know, we can sit down and say, and I think that many times we want to get to the same conclusion. It's just the different way of getting there.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, just take, for example, healthcare. Republicans and Democrats are here on healthcare. But as far as how they're going to get there. But ultimately, I think we both want healthcare to be more affordable, and we both want, you know, everybody to have the best possible chance of having access to healthcare and being able to get the things that they need. It's just, you know, we have to remember that we do have common ground there.
Exactly. And things have just gotten so stinking toxic. Mm-hmm. But, you know, people that I deal with, like online, constantly saying, you know, Democrats are evil. Democrats want to destroy America. Democrats don't own. There's no way a Democrat could be pro-gun. I think this conversation we're having right now will give us both a lot of credibility with both sides. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd love to have more Republicans come on. I feel like the debate. There's a lot of things Charlie Kirk said that I don't agree with, but man, was he onto something in terms of, you know, not forcing the conversation, but creating an environment where these conversations, the open dialogue could happen. And that's inspiring to me, you know? And the thing is, I don't have to agree with him. I don't even have to like him to be inspired by him.
Right.
You know, I was inspired by you to be transparent, because I saw, you know, you making some posts and saw your website's awesome, by the way. It's one of the best websites, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any candidate running.
It's one thing, especially if you're running with little to no name ID, I mean, you need to do it right. And so I made sure to try to do it right.
It's nice.
Well, thank you.
But I saw we're going to get in it. It's good. This is just a good segue, but we're going to get into tariffs next. And just saw that you were not a big fan of tariffs. And I just think it's important for people to hear that. I mean, when I have conversations with people around tariffs, like, man, they would go to war, like fighting for tariffs. And I don't even think they understand completely what tariffs mean. What do they mean economically?
Right.
What do they mean to trade policy, trade partners? Maybe some of the consequences or repercussions from these tariffs, they could take decades for us to piece back together. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some pros and cons, but what can you break down your view of tariffs, and we'll just kind of take it piece by piece. Are there any tariffs you agree with? Where does your tariff policy come from?
I mean, I think if we're just talking pragmatically, sure, they can be used as a negotiation tactic, but I've maintained from the beginning that if they stay, it's going to hurt. But aside from that, you can't just, as far as the executive branch, one thing that you'll find, I'm very opposed to investing more power into the executive branch. I think that we have separation of powers for a reason. And so whenever you have a president just for whatever reason he pleases saying, hey, we're going to tariff you. Oh, you ran a commercial. We're going to tariff you. Oh, what was it? The movie industry is now in trouble. We're going to tariff movie. It's just all over the place, and that's too much power for one individual. And obviously the Supreme Court is taking it up now. And I hope that they say that belongs to Congress, because taxes, and that's what it is. It's a tax on American importers. Foreign countries are not paying these tariffs. Not And you can say in a roundabout way, they might lower their costs in order to keep market share, but they're not paying the tariffs. American importers are. They're passing it on to U.S. consumers. And so it's a tax, and so it should originate in the House and go through the Senate and be passed legislatively, not through one individual. That's my overarching theme. I would say that they're not conservative. And I think it was Milton Friedman that gave the example, tariffs, because everybody likes to say, well, we've been getting ripped off. Well, this is the thing. Whenever you go to the store and you look for television, and you don't look to see where it's made usually, you might, some people may, but most of the time you look for the lowest price. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at the shelf and you say, well, this television is $200, this one's $300, I'm going to get this television. No one put a gun to your head and said, buy this television. You went and you bought the one that was the cheapest. Now that television might so happen to come from China, and the one that was $300 came from US or a different country. But I guess the point I'm getting at is that it was voluntary. So to say we're getting ripped off, I think is completely disingenuous, because trade is not something that's so abstract that it happens by, the government can influence trade policy, but ultimately it's me and you and other consumers that are ultimately engaging in this trade. Every product that you decide to buy or not buy, that affects trade. Because if people didn't buy the Chinese televisions, they would not be able to sell them here. But people do buy them because you voluntarily entered into that trade. Does that make sense?
It does. And then I think about just how chaotic the tariff policy has been. It's like a moving target.
Sure.
And that really has put a lot of pressure on the manufacturers. There's been a lot of folks, I think small businesses have gone out of business, sadly, because of the tariff policy, of what it has done to imports, especially from China. But I have folks that comment on my content that say the most recent one that was the most shocking was that Trump's goal with tariffs is to eliminate taxes altogether.
Yeah, so this is the thing. Tariffs have been sold as this like magic silver bullet that's going to onshore businesses, so it's going to bring back manufacturing, but it's also going to bring in massive amounts of revenue so that we can pay down the debt and the deficit, and now also dividend checks, right? Put that in there as well. I guess the point is it can't do all of those things, because if it brings back manufacturing, the taxes, like you said, we would replace the federal income tax. Well, if we onshore, if it's successful in onshoring, all the manufacturing comes back to the U.S., then that revenue dries up. And now what are we going to do about the federal income taxes, right? If that revenue dries up, we can't do that. But then vice versa. If we want to continue to bring in revenue to pay down our debt and deficit, then it didn't work as far as the stated goal of onshoring. And also, if you keep in mind, in April, whenever we had the Liberation Day, I think it was April 2nd, mm-hmm. the tariffs were sold as they were going to be reciprocal, in the sense that we're going to tariff for tariff, right? Yeah. They do us 15%, we're going to do them 15%. But now we're seeing with some deals that are being struck, I think one was with the EU, and there's been several others, that they actually reduced their tariffs down to nothing. Now they might have some other non-trade barriers, but they brought their tariffs down to nothing, and then we're still tariffing them 15%. And people are saying, wow, this is amazing. Like we have the upper hand. We're now winning. I can't believe they agreed to this deal. Well, when you look at economies like China and other communist regimes that have been using tariffs for years, do we want to emulate their trade practices? Because they use their tariffs knowing that it's going to hurt their average citizen in order to prop up their government, and because their businesses are subsidized by the government.
Yeah.
So they have no problem hurting their citizens, making prices higher for their citizens in order to prop themselves up. So why would we now copy trade practices of China for the last umpteen years? I mean, it can't do all of those things, and it's not conservative.
Well, and then I've also seen data that suggests that we have like hundreds of thousands of vacant manufacturing jobs. I mean, do you feel like this push to bring manufacturing back to America is really important, or should we really be focused on being more of a, AI innovation, tech innovation, things like that?
My personal belief is that it's not going to be like it was ever again. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, to think that we're going to go backwards 50 years, I think is a bit naive. I think that as we progress, we let other countries do the things that, maybe Americans don't want to do anymore. And then we can be on the cutting edge of, like you said, innovation and other tech-related industries. Or maybe just more specialized things that are less, assembly line, right? I mean, I think that we're innovative. And there's going to be jobs here for Americans. And as the world progresses, as the economy progresses, those jobs are going to change to be a different type of job. But to think that we're going to go backwards, like I said, I think it's a bit naive. And I don't think I ever finished my point earlier. Concerning tariffs, I think it was Milton Friedman that said, whenever someone imposes more tariffs on you, if you then in turn impose tariffs on them in retaliation, it's like someone shoots a hole in the bottom of your boat, and in the return, you take the gun and you just shoot 3 holes in the bottom of a boat. I mean, tariffs are bad no matter who's doing them. And so if they tariff you, that's bad, sure. We would like there to be no barriers between trade, sure. But then if we turn around and we say, well, because you tariffed us, we're going to tariff you, that's just making a bad situation and making it worse.
So you're a free trade guy, is what I'm hearing. Well, what about this incredibly massive debt that we're in? Where, in your opinion, like, what do we need to be doing? What do we need to cut? What do we need to invest in? How do we protect the interest of the working class? Because, affordability is still a problem.
Sure.
And it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. The deficit, no matter what president we have in office, they added the deficit. And we got to get this under control. And I know you're not going to be a fan of doing that through taxes.
Right.
So how do we do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously you take the low-hanging fruit first. And we already saw with Doge, where they tried to cut the waste, fraud, and abuse and said that they found $190 billion, I think, in waste, fraud, and abuse. I don't know if we're going to see that to fruition. But obviously, we don't want to come after anybody's welfare programs or the entitlements that they've paid into. Take the low-hanging fruit first. But then at this point, with the way that inflation is going, I mean, we say inflation's at 2.7% or it was at 9% or whatever we want to say it was. I don't believe those numbers. I think that whenever you live your life and you see the cost going up, I think it's far higher than what they're actually saying. And so I think that if we don't address the debt, if we don't address the deficit, then all of this is a moot point because costs are going to keep soaring. Things are going to continue to be more unaffordable. And so I think that ultimately we just have to cut back across the board. I think everything's on the table, obviously, after you get rid of the low-hanging fruit. I'm a big fan of Senator Rand Paul. He has a 6-penny plan. And it's where you take 6% of the federal budget and you drop the budget down 6% every year for 5 years until the budget is balanced. And he says, look, when we talk about it like this, for every dollar spent already, or spent now, you just cut 6 cents. And that sounds easy, and that's obviously easier said than done.
Right.
But he said if you go to specific programs within the government and you say, hey, could you do with 6% less than you did last year? Many of the programs, I think that you really could, if we really buckled down. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. But if we don't, then all of the programs that people have paid into, Social Security, Medicare, everyone's taking a haircut at some point because it's going to be insolvent and we're not going to be able to keep these going.
That's what concerns me, is that, the clock's ticking. The sand is running out in the hourglass, and, we're talking about things that I think really, not that they don't matter, but they maybe should not be given the priority that they have. Well, what about, so in terms of like bringing income in, if you're not a fan of taxes, you are a fan of, making responsible cuts.
I want to say this really quick. I don't want to interrupt you. But
please.
I just want to preface why I'm not a fan of taxes, and it's the same reason why I'm not a fan of tariffs. Because you have a lot of folks right now on social media, whenever the administration posts online, they say, we've brought in $200 billion in tariff revenue. And people are saying, well, see, all of y'all were wrong. It's working. Tariffs are working. I'm like, no one ever said it's not going to bring in revenue, just to be clear.
Yeah.
We knew it was going to bring in revenue. The problem is it's Americans paying it. And that's why I said it's a tax, because it's American importers. And so the same reason why I'm not on board with the tariffs is the same reason why I'm not on board with taxes, is the fact that we've seen over and over again, the government is the worst manager of our money. They absolutely do not spend it on the stuff that we need. They mismanage it, spend it on the military-industrial complex, spend it on foreign aid. I mean, you name it. I mean, continually we see that they are poor managers of money. And so that's why I don't think that raising taxes would fix the problems that we have. Because in an idealistic world, and I would still be opposed to it because I'm in favor, your labor belongs to you. When you go to work and you work so many hours, the government didn't go to work, you went to work, right? And so I'm not in favor of taxes for that reason. But even in an idealistic view, that the government would take that money, use it for exactly what they said it was going to be used for, then maybe that'd be a feasible option. But I just don't see that happening. And so I think that, you have to reduce the size of government, because whenever you increase taxes, you're increasing the size of government. And I think that the more the government grows, the more your freedom shrinks, and they're never going to use it for the stuff that they say they are.
Well, and that's where I was going just a second ago. I was trying to guide you in to see if you would bring up that military-industrial complex, because, man, what a massive budget, we're talking about to I would even say, like, have the most powerful military in the world, because it seems like we buy stuff we don't use.
Sure.
We buy planes we don't need. I mean, we develop stuff that doesn't even, get out of the hangar.
And talking about the waste, fraud, and abuse, I've got folks that I know that were in the military, and they would say at the end of the year that if they hadn't used all of the stuff that, and this is every agency, this is every department, but if they hadn't used all of their products, or, I wasn't in the military, I don't know the exact phrasage, but they would just expend everything at the end. Because if they didn't use it all, then they wouldn't get a budget increase the next go around.
Yeah.
And that's not just, strictly talking about the military, that's every agency. But to think that the military is off the table in regards to waste, fraud, abuse, and, to think they're off the table in regards to cuts, I think would be naive. I mean, just for example, like the big beautiful bill increased, we now have $25 billion, I think, allocated for the Iron Dome. I mean, we're $38 trillion in debt. I'm not sure that's exactly the best use of our money right now. And even with the CR, not this recent CR, but the one actually in March that we passed in preparation for the big beautiful bill, that was labeled as a clean CR, but I can't remember the exact dollar amount, but it increased actually money going towards the military. And that's not to say, I'm pro-military. I think we need to take care of our veterans. I think we need to take care of the folks that have provided us the freedoms that we have here in America, because without them, we wouldn't be able to sit down and have this conversation right now. But like I said, I just think it's naive to think that, this department's off the table. Because if you really sit down, you can do that with anything. You say, well, not this one. We don't need to cut this one, or not this one. And you can just go back and forth, and eventually there's nowhere else to cut.
Yeah. And gosh, a lot of waste, I would think, would be an ideal term for military. There's just so much wasted. Like the planes, I think in the big beautiful bill they were talking about, like they're going to order all these F-18s or whatever it is, and there were some people pushing back on that and saying, well, gosh, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, there may be a lot less pilots in the cockpit. These planes might be we might be all drones.
Right.
And so now we're going to have all these planes that need pilots, and we don't need pilots anymore.
Right.
So it's just things like that.
Yeah.
Anything else, any other points you'd like to make in terms of the economy or the debt before we go into healthcare?
Not that I can think of right now. I mean, just reiterating what you said as far as, it's just everything's on the table, and we have to be conservative about it. And that's not to say we don't want a strong military. That's not to say that we don't want to protect the homeland. But I think also, too, whenever we stop trying to be the world's police, I think that we'll see we can actually do with a lot less in regards to the military. But obviously, whenever we're spread thin and we're involved in every single conflict and we're in every single country, the military needs a lot of money to do those things. But maybe we should stop doing those things.
Yeah.
Hey, fellow Blue Dots, we would love for you to connect with us on social media. We're on Instagram and TikTok at Raised Red Living Blue. Okay, back to the episode.
Well, let's hit healthcare. Man, this is a big one, especially just coming off this shutdown and all the drama that was around that. I think it would be fair to say that, you don't support the Affordable Care Act.
I do not.
Well, let's just start there. Why not?
I think it's made healthcare unaffordable. I mean, for folks like myself, I pay $1,200 a month for health insurance. And I think that we've seen the folks in the middle class shouldering the burden of the more lower income individuals because they're getting the subsidies, and money doesn't grow on trees, and or at least unless you're the Fed, then you just print the money. But for normal folks, money doesn't grow on trees. And so that burden just gets shifted. And I think that's all it is. It's just a burden shift to folks that make slightly more income, but not enough to, be able to still have a lot of disposable income after paying for healthcare.
And I just think it chaps a lot of asses when you say like Affordable Care Act, and people are like, affordable my butt. I mean, there's nothing, affordable about it. And $1,200 a month on a $75,000 a year salary. I mean,
it really cuts in.
Man, does it? I mean, the number one thing my wife complains about is the cost of insurance. Mm-hmm. She's just like, and so we're talking about, I think she's going to do it. She's going to scale things back and increase our deductibles moving into the new year to kind of lower that cost. But do you have any ideas in terms of replacement policy? Are you in some rooms involved with some conversations right now with folks in, Alabama Republican Party? I know Katie Britt is, I just saw something in maybe Yellowhammer News the other day about her working on some changes. I think she wants to extend the subsidies, but just long enough, just to provide some immediate relief, but then as soon as possible, get rid of the Affordable Act altogether.
I'm not on board with extending the subsidies. I mean, I think they were meant to be temporary. They were there during COVID. I think that they should sunset. But also at the same time, I think that we need to have a Congress that actually goes to work. I mean, if we look at the amount of time that they've actually worked since, no, that's not to say they're not in their district doing certain things, but the amount of times that they've been in Washington voting on bills since like September, I mean, it's insane. I mean, it's just been a handful of days. We need Congress to actually come together and work hard on this and do it immediately and do it swiftly. But I think that as far as creating a solution, and I think that solution is going to be, I mean, for example, if you get in a lot of car accidents, you're not going to be eligible for normal car insurance because you're such a liability that if they were to allow you, everyone's rates would go up. And that's what we're seeing right now with healthcare. And so I think that, unfortunately, and it's just a fact of life, I think if you're a higher risk individual, you're going to need to be in a separate pool. And I think that way all of those folks can, be in one group, and then the folks that are less of a liability can be in this group. But I think some other reforms that we could see is price transparency. I mean, if you go to a doctor's office, they can't tell you how much the x-ray is going to be. But if you could know, well, here it's this much, here it's this much, then that would increase competition.
Yeah.
And I think competition is the ultimate thing that drives prices down. Some other things as far as maybe some more cash pay models, but also too, allowing more organizations, and this is another thing that I've heard Rand Paul talk about, but like club members, like if you're a member of Costco or Sam's, or maybe folks that are with Amazon, maybe even churches, let them band together and negotiate insurance rates and be able to form groups where everyone in this, with this dues paying club can get insurance through us. And I think that the more competition you have, the cheaper it's going to be. But whenever you have the government have a monopoly on the insurance, there's no incentive to drive prices down because there's no competition.
Yeah.
We didn't get into the dividend checks.
That's right. Yeah.
That was one thing I wanted to talk about.
You're not for that, right?
No, not at all. And it's wealth redistribution. It's taking from, look, we're all paying the tariffs. Everyone is paying the tariffs. So then we're going to turn around and send $2,000 checks to every individual making $100,000 or less. Well, if you made $150,000 a year, you still paid those tariffs. Now, I'm not for sending the money back, period. But let's just say you were going to send the money back. It should go to all people, because if we're talking about, well, it's our taxes, we paid it, which some folks don't believe that we're paying them. They just think we're getting extra money from the other countries and sending it out. But we're paying the tariffs, and so everyone's paying the tariffs. So if we're going to do dividend checks, everyone should get dividend checks. But then secondly, when you do the math on that, there is over 200 million people that make $100,000 or less annually. If you take the estimated tariff revenue by the end of the year, which is estimated to be about $300 billion, and you divide that up by $2,000 checks, you get 150 million. So we're over 50 million. We're going to be short of, there's going to be 50 million plus people that don't get a check. But if we did send them out, obviously they would get a check and we would just print the money.
Yeah.
So, it's just, we're in this circular pattern of just printing money, adding to the deficit, making things more unaffordable.
Yeah, and I can't remember who it was, but there was a very high-ranking Republican that just flat out came out and stated, like, hey, we can't afford to do this.
Yeah, I think it was Ron Johnson, I think.
Maybe so.
But then you got Senator Hawley that's all over it. That's like, I mean, I think he introduced legislation to send out the dividend checks. And the money's just not there. It's just not there.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with the healthcare. In an idealistic world, in a perfect unicorn scenario, if there was just infinite money, sure, we should pay for everything, right? Everyone should get free healthcare, but that's just not the reality of life. The money has to be there and that's what I was talking about earlier with the burden being shifted, because ultimately, even if the government prints money, they're just removing themselves from the burden. But that burden is going to get passed on to us, because the more they print money, the more your purchasing power shrinks. And so that's what leads to, I mean, if your dollar used to go this far, now it only goes this far. And so when the money's not there, whether it be for dividend checks or for healthcare, it's just not there.
Well, I think it could be a pretty serious advantage for you, like heading into primary season, in terms of creating a degree of separation from Gary. But, if he's not having these same conversations, or if he is not, bringing these similar things to light that you are, I think it could be a big thing, because all you really need to do, though, is get people to do the homework. Mm-hmm. That's what frustrates the heck out of me. It's like, well, we've got these devices. They're all plugged into the internet. The internet's got all this information. Your, future constituents, all they would really need to do is do a couple Google searches, and they go, well, heck, he's speaking truth. Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is that Gary knows. Gary is willfully not saying anything. I mean, if you go to his Twitter feed right now, and now you can search keywords. Mm-hmm. If you go into his Twitter feed and you type in tariff and you hit search, you'll find a tweet from 2018, because during Trump's first term, he's utilized tariffs a bit, and you'll see that he pushed back against the tariffs. He said, he understands what the president is doing, but he thinks that long term it's going to hurt Americans. That's what he said in 2018. That was the last time he mentioned tariffs in his Twitter feed, and he hasn't said a word in 2024, 2025. There's been no word about it. But we can see from his past history, unless his viewpoints have changed, which I don't think they have. I think Gary is a very conservative guy, but I think that he is afraid to say when the president is wrong. And I think that's the problem that we have right now is, and I want to reiterate, maybe your viewership doesn't want to hear me say this, but the Republican viewership would want to hear me say this, is that when President Trump is right, I'll say he's right. I'll stand up and support and stand up for President Trump. When the president is wrong, I will stand up and say, you're wrong. This is not the right move. This is going to hurt people, or this is going to, cause a disaster later on down the road. And I think that the Republican Party that we're seeing today is there's no room for dissent. And Gary falls into that same camp. He's just, and especially now, he's gotten into a leadership position in Congress. And so it's imperative that he toe the line and do exactly as leadership says, exactly as the speaker says, exactly as the president says. And that's not good for the American people. That's not good for the constituents in Alabama. We need independent thinkers in the sense that they're independent in regards to what their district is thinking and what their district needs, because every district is different.
Well, and just to bunny trail off that just a little bit, I'm wondering if one of the side effects of the recent action statements of Marjorie Taylor Greene will open the door for more Republicans to dissent, because you're right, they just haven't been willing to do it.
Right.
So that's why
I think that's why you're seeing folks, and sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
But like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like Congressman Massey, immediately Trump is, funding a primary challenger. He said he was going to help a primary challenger against Marjorie Taylor Greene, which now she's since resigned, or said she's going to resign. But there is a primary challenger running against Congressman Massey, which when you look at his voting record, he is one of, if not the most conservative members in the House. But because he's on the opposite side of Trump and he's willing to say, hey, you're wrong on X, Y, and Z, then the president doesn't want to allow anyone to get the idea that they can be independent, that they can have a differing opinion. And so I think that's why he's going after these folks, is because he doesn't want folks to even think about having a different idea than he has. And I just think that that's not, we don't worship the president. We don't represent the president as people in Congress. You represent your constituents.
That's, I think, the biggest point to be made. If you're toeing the line, who are you actually serving? Is it party over people? Or, it really should be the other way around. So great points there. You mentioned not extending subsidies, just letting them run out, and that's going to cause a lot of pain for people. But is it your belief that that pain will just put more pressure to solve the problem and not kick the can down the road?
I think it could, and I don't think, and obviously now we're in November, but I mean, truthfully, if Congress tomorrow, everyone wakes up and they go in and they go to their respective committees and we start trying to really work on healthcare, I mean, I think it can be done a lot faster. Congress just moves so slow. And so I don't even think it really has to get to the point that there's a lot of pain. Now, maybe that could be a leverage point. I'm not in favor of using people's misfortune and people's pain as leverage. I just think they need to do their job. They just need to show up and actually work at it. And I think it can be done a lot faster.
Yeah, it seems like, they're running some late fourth quarter offense right now. They're really kind of pounding the rock. Gosh, would that be such a letdown if it's a lot of smoke and mirrors? But I think they got to be careful, because people, it really seems like people are kind of reaching their tipping point, their breaking point. And so I think, if they want to stay in office, and some of them probably shouldn't, this may be a deciding factor one way or the other there. All right. Well, anything else on healthcare before we move on?
Not that I can think of. There are some state level things. I mean, this wouldn't be really something I could do in Congress, but I think that it's important that people know about it and are knowledgeable and can advocate for it.
Yeah.
But here in Alabama, we're a reduced practice state, so nurse practitioners don't have the same freedoms that a doctor would have. And so I think that if we were to kind of expand that, I think that would give people more options. But also, too, certificate of need laws right now is something that Alabama has. There's been states that have done away with it, but right now, so with a certificate of need law, basically the government can kind of dictate whether or not a community is in need of a certain practice, even if there's folks that are willing to start the business or to build it and to employ it and to get folks there. The state can come in and say, well, actually, you need to prove that there's a need for it in the community. And there's requirements. There has to be so many beds. There has to be so many employees. It's so stringent. And I think that's a part of deregulating, is whenever someone can come in and say, hey, I want to put a very small doctor's office here for a rural community, and if it doesn't succeed, then it is what it is, but I think it can be successful. I think it can serve this community. I don't think it's the government's job to come in and say, no, we don't think so. Because a lot of times what you're seeing is you're having these bigger corporations come in and lobby against these smaller corporations coming in because they don't want competition. And why don't they want competition? It's exactly what I was talking about earlier, is competition drives prices down. Because anytime there's competition, then you're going to have to lower your prices or to provide some sort of incentive for folks to come to you instead. And so also working in healthcare, I've seen many times right now, there is a law where you can do telemedicine visits if you're unable to go out to the doctor, but if you don't see resolve in whatever issue it was after 4 visits of receiving telemedicine, then you have to make an in-person visit to the doctor within a reasonable time. And I think that's classified as within a year. And that's a lot of time, but you have to remember, I do home health physical therapy for a living. And so the folks that I'm seeing, they're homebound. They can't get out. Sometimes with a relative, they have some exceptions, but there are some folks that literally just can't. Either they don't even have a car, they live completely by themselves with no family members nearby, whatever it may be. Well, what I'm seeing happen is they'll do their 4 telemedicine visits with their doctor. Well, then their doctor says, well, hey, if you don't come in and see me in person now, I'm not going to refill your meds. I can't refill your meds. And so what happens is they just don't go to the doctor. They don't get their medicine refilled. And so then their condition deteriorates over time until eventually they have to call 911. They go to the hospital. They have a big hospital stay. That's expensive for them. That's expensive for the taxpayers. Versus if we could expand the telemedicine and make it to where for folks that are maybe classified as homebound, they could have never-ending, telemedicine visits. I think that could really help people because then they could have access to their medication, have access to regular care, and stay out of the hospital. But I think what you're seeing with the certificate of need, with the telemedicine, with both of those things, it's just getting the government out of the way and giving people more options.
And just so for the record, you are a very state-driven politician. Things should reside, decisions should be made.
Right. My goal in going to Washington would be to take power from Washington, return it back to your local municipalities, return it back to, the counties, return it back to the state, because ultimately there's no one size fits all from Washington. It's always going to help someone and hurt someone else. And whenever you have more power back to the state legislators, I think it's just going to work out better for the folks of those communities.
Hey, fellow Blue Dots, don't forget you can find all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please hit that subscribe button, and we would love a review. Okay, now back to the episode.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk about presidential war powers. You have made it clear. Towards the end of the last segment, you said, listen, you want to take power away from Washington, return it to the states. The power that the executive branch has should go through Congress. That's one thing that was really concerning to me, is there was a point this year where I was like, our separation of powers means nothing.
Right.
The judicial branch, there's no consequences.
Right. And well, even too, you're seeing Congress has just abdicated so much of their power. I know we talked about the tariffs 10 times right now, but
yeah.
It could be the tariffs, it could be the war powers, it could be the Epstein files. It doesn't matter. If we are just saying, look, we're going to go along with 100% of what the president says, no matter what, in order to keep my seat, then we might as well not even have a Congress.
Exactly.
And I don't want to live in a world like that.
Me neither. Well, the hot topic of the day is the drug boat bombings in Venezuela. I just saw the news today that they have reopened a closed Navy base in Puerto Rico, maybe it was. We're posturing for more military action, but you've got folks like Rand Paul who are going like, what are we doing here? You have the UK, Colombia no longer sharing intelligence with us. There's some warning signs there, but yet I'm scrolling through Facebook and I follow everything. I'm following Fox News. I'm following conservative Facebook pages, groups, everything to see what's happening on both sides. And literally, I could go to my political feed right now, do a little scroll, and I would come across a conservative group that says, give me a hell yeah. Who wants to see those boats bombed to, obliterated? Let's bomb as many people as we can, or, drug related cartel boats, but we don't know for sure.
Right.
That's who we're bombing, or at least nobody's telling us they know for sure.
Right. And people evidently must just be much more trusting of the government in general than I am. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. I'm inherently not trusting of the government. And so I think that we need things to be really laid out before us. And I want answers, right? I want to know who they are. We know the names of terrorists that we kill, but yet we don't know the names of any of these individuals that were on these boats. We really don't truly know. We just know what the administration says, but how can we know for sure? Now they say it's based on good intel, but then like you said, why would other countries stop sharing intel if it was based on good intel? This is not even in our waters. This is international waters right off the coast of their own country in these little boats, these little dinghy boats. I understand that we want to stop drugs from coming into the United States. I get it. I understand people have been affected by drugs. People have lost family members to drugs. But we have a Coast Guard. My dad was in the Coast Guard. They serve a purpose. We can interdict these boats. We can try these people. There's a correct avenue to do this. But the president campaigned on no new wars. And whenever we're just bombing folks, there's rules of engagement.
Yeah.
You can't just bomb other countries. And you also have to remember that, people are saying, they're terrorists. They're narco-terrorists. Well, who designated them terrorists? The president did. So we're going to allow the president to determine, well, I'm going to say unilaterally, these folks are terrorists. Now I have the power to bomb them because they are what I say they are. That's just so much power with one individual. I just don't understand how Congress can continue to abdicate away so much of their power. And I even saw folks the other day saying, well, we went to Congress in 2001 with the authorized use of military force, and that now the president can kind of do whatever he wants. That is specific to, which I would not have been on board with that, but it did go through Congress. But that was specific to countries, to individuals that were the perpetrators of 9/11. So that does not apply to this situation whatsoever.
Yeah, there's a lot of bending and stretching going on. So just to be clear, your position is, and if you're elected, like you want to bring this congressional oversight, congressional power back where it belongs, to really reinforce the checks and balances.
Right, 100%.
Yeah. So
If we're gonna go to war,
yeah.
I think the people should have a say. And to say we're not at war, I think is a bit naive. We are definitely, like you said, we're posturing. We are putting a lot of pressure on Venezuela because we want access to their oil. And so we want a more friendly leader in that region. And that's exactly what's taking place right now. And like I said earlier, the president campaigned on no new wars. I don't think that's something that we should be getting involved with our military. But if we are, we should have a say-so.
Do you have a position on the president's latest Truth Social post about the sedition of these handful of Democrats that came out and made this video just reminding soldiers that they don't have an obligation to follow illegal orders?
Yeah, and it is true. I mean, soldiers don't have an obligation to follow illegal orders. And while we're saying this, if you don't mind, I want to actually read something.
Oh, please do.
He posted a photo, and it says, here, I'll show it to you. It's like a plaque, and it says the loyalty to the Constitution. And it goes through, and at the end, it just says, the United States boldly broke with the ancient military custom of swearing loyalty to a leader. Article 5 required that American officers thereafter swear loyalty to our basic law, the Constitution. And so it almost seems like the president would be, I didn't see the video, so I can't say for sure what they were saying, but if all they said was, hey, don't follow unlawful orders, then there's nothing wrong in saying that, and that's completely true, and it would seem that the president would agree.
Well, I have maintained throughout this entire year that in terms of dangerous, violent, political rhetoric, it starts at the top. And it sometimes, to me, seems like he doesn't understand how dangerous his words can be. I mean, there's been...
Are you talking about when he said punishable by death?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand that. That was over the top.
Well,
talking about over the top, sorry to go off topic here.
No.
Some other subject of his Truth Social was, I don't know if you saw recently, where he came out and, like we talked about earlier, he's challenging or funding a challenger for Congressman Massey in Kentucky. He posted on Truth Social, Thomas Massey, his wife passed away about 1.5 years ago, and then he recently got remarried. And the president took to Truth Social to say something about how quickly he got married, that he's not even talking about Trump. Trump's not even met his new wife yet, doesn't even know her name, and that he just said the whole thing was a bit weird. And then he goes on to say something about how he's a bad congressman, he's going to get ousted from Congress. And I'm like, why would you go after someone's wife? Why would you go after someone's dead wife? Why would you go after someone that has just not too long ago experienced that level of grief and pain and having lost a wife of 30 plus years where they had 4 kids together? And then I just thought it was so rich that the president, with his relationship history, is going to take to social media to have something to say about that. I mean, I don't understand what we're doing with some of the things we're saying now.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it just adds fuel to the fire, and it's more toxicity, it's more poison. I have a problem with people saying the Trump shutdown, the Schumer shutdown. I feel like Katie Britt gets in McCraw a lot because she's so partisan, and I'm just like, we got to tone this down. But some people have made the point that maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene's decision was somehow based on safety. Like, I think there's probably a lot of things at play. I mean,
Sure.
like, whether she says she's going to run for president or not, she's like, her poll numbers are huge in that regard. So who knows what she'll end up doing. But it wouldn't surprise me that she was like, man, this dang rhetoric.
And look, I don't think it's a coincidence, and she's been, very hot and heavy on the rhetoric sometimes too herself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that.
But when it turned against her,
Right.
she out.
Which I think it's interesting, though, too, that first of all, both of them, I don't know where we are as far as, this might tie into what we're going to talk about here soon. I know you mentioned the Epstein files.
Yeah, we're almost
I don't want to
there.
get ahead of everything, but her and Congressman Massey both were pushing for the release of the Epstein files. Her and Congressman Massey both have some of the most conservative voting records as far as adherence to the Constitution. When you look at a Republican Liberty Caucus, that's a really good voting record scorecard that I like to look at, because that really goes to show us, how do people actually vote in terms of our liberties, our freedoms, and the Constitution. Both of them are up here. And then you've got Lindsey Graham, who's getting Trump's full endorsement, who is down here on the liberty, freedom, just adherence to the Constitution, war, all of those things. So I don't think it's a coincidence that these two individuals that are two of the most conservative members in the House are potentially facing primary challengers and are publicly getting backlash from the president, and he wants them out of Congress.
Yeah, my personal belief is that politicians like you who are not necessarily distancing themselves from the president, but saying, hey, just call them balls and strikes. Just call balls and strikes. I think that's what everybody should do. But I think the people that are rubber stamping and towing the line, could be in trouble.
Yeah,
The further we get along, because things just aren't going.
He's not going to be here forever.
Yeah.
And your voting record will. And people are going to remember whenever you didn't stand up for the principles. And that's the thing, is that we are supposed to stand on principles, because people's principles change, but a set of principles, they are what they are. The principles themselves don't change. People do. And so whenever it seems like you swear allegiance to an individual, you're going to have to really do a lot of gymnastics to, I guess, seem principled, because you can't adhere yourself to one individual so closely that you forget the other aspects of what conservatism is.
And he's I think it's fair to say, a very flawed individual. And some of the stuff, you said, you support him on some initiatives, and in some initiatives you don't.
I mainly support him on, well, first of all, I do think he's done a great job of shutting down the border. And
no question.
I think that's, and especially too, he did it without spending a dime. If you remember, before the Big Beautiful Bill passed, border crossings were, I think, nothing. I mean, zero. I think that was what they said in the month of June, which was the month preceding the Big Beautiful Bill. And then we turned around and we gave ICE, I think, like $300 billion, which I'm all for people getting paid, and people, if we need certain things here or there to maybe fund the border wall or whatever it may be. But once again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you don't scrutinize even stuff that Republicans like, as far as is it fiscally conservative, then you're not really, in my mind, you're not really conservative. And so whenever border crossings are nothing, why do we need $300 billion extra dollars going towards the border? Why can't we, once again, pull back on the money? That way things are more affordable. And other aspects, what I was going to say is the things that President Trump campaigned on. He campaigned on no new wars. He campaigned on affordability. He campaigned on the Epstein files. He campaigned on the border. I mean, all of those types of things, that's what I support. But whenever the president himself strays from that, we need folks that are willing to call him out.
Well, and before we get to the Epstein files, I think the only point I was going to make is that it concerns me, like, the way this looks, or whether, does it hurt? It seems like in a lot of cases we can rightly so claim moral high ground, but if we're attacking Venezuela for their oil, and using the war on drugs as the smoke and mirrors. I mean, like somebody like Putin could go, well, look what y'all are doing over here. Maybe I want to get some of these rare earth minerals that Ukraine's got that y'all signed that deal for. But, how is what I'm doing any different than what you're doing? There could be a little double standard at play there. But also, I thought we had reached a place where we had all kind of agreed that the war on drugs was not something we could win, or we're not fighting it the right way.
Right. I mean, I think ultimately people are going to do what they want to do, and the government can't really influence people's behaviors in that regard. Now, is that to say that we shouldn't try to stop illegal drugs from coming to the U.S.? Absolutely not. But once again, really to say, I don't think it's about the drugs coming to the U.S. with what we're going on with Venezuela. So I don't even really think it's the war on drugs. I think that is what they're saying it is, but I don't think that's what it actually is. Now, as far as the war on drugs is concerned, I don't think it's a winning battle. But if we were going to try to stop drugs from coming to the U.S., it needs to be done the correct way, through the adequate agencies, through the Coast Guard, not just bombing people to smithereens. I mean, I understand these are not U.S. citizens, but if someone was dealing drugs here in the U.S., we're not just going to execute them, just no trial, don't even know their name. We just see them holding a bag of drugs, we're just going to kill them. That's not the way things operate. And so that right there should tell you that that's not actually what's taking place. We're bombing them for something else.
Yeah. And just want to remind people, like, we've got these devices in our hands and our laps. There's a lot of information. I just wish people would do a little fact checking a little more often, or just start. Like, this whole thing of like fact checking becoming like something you shouldn't do in an interview with a politician or aspiring politician, to me, is crazy.
I would say that my campaign, my philosophy is the America First that Trump campaigned on. And it's not going to be things that are hurting Americans. It's not going to be tariffs that are driving up unaffordability. It's not going to be protecting pedophiles. It's not going to be wars with other countries. That's not America First. That's not things that Americans want. That's not something that we should really be focused on. We should be focused on making life better for American citizens.
And I think one final point, maybe just on checks and balances, I feel like the most damaging thing to our democracy has been the doubt that has been placed, or the lack of trust that has been instilled with the judicial branch. We could debate weaponization, Biden weaponizing the DOJ against Trump weaponizing the DOJ against
I do think it's become
people.
very partisan, for sure.
Yeah. And it's like, I was having a conversation with somebody online the other day about a Trump-appointed judge blocking, I don't know if it was immigration or tariffs, but I was having a conversation with a conservative, and they were like, oh my gosh, you can't trust any of these judges. They're all bought and paid for. And I thought, oh my gosh, a decision is only just, a decision is only warranted if it is like the guy you support making the decision, or if it's hurting the people you can't stand.
Right.
Crazy.
But I think that it's really the underlying problem that we're dealing with in general, as far as things have become so polarized and so partisan that we're forgetting that there's supposed to be separation, that you're not supposed to rubber stamp. And I think we're seeing that with judges. They think, well, I've been appointed by so-and-so, so I need to basically legislate from the bench. And that's on both sides. And it's important. And I don't want to nitpick, but I know you said democracy, but we're a constitutional republic. And it's important that you don't forget that first word, the Constitution. And we all, or not we all, but every elected official in the federal government swears an oath to the Constitution. And so it shouldn't be about what party you are. Now, obviously, everybody's got different interpretations, but I think ultimately you should be striving to adhere to the Constitution as closely as possible. And if it's something wrong with the Constitution, if there's something you want done differently, then there's ways to amend it. But it is not easy, but that's because we don't need to go as the wind blows, or go as the parties shift, or go as, populism says one thing, or whatever it may be, because there's tried and true things that work, and we need to make sure that we And that's really what conservatism is that we're not going to be so progressive that we're going to, whatever the populist movement is as at the time, that we're going to forget what being conservative actually means and forget that we actually have a constitution that we're supposed to adhere to.
And you were describing yourself, making this distinction, I think, in the early part of the interview, like you describe yourself as a constitutional Republican?
Constitutional conservative is what I would say.
Constitutional conservative. And so constitutional conservative, America First Republican, maybe is a good,
there you go.
Good slogan. Yeah, so just remember, if he uses that, I helped out there. All right, so let's talk about the Epstein files. What has been your position all along? Sounds like it was like, release the damn files. I don't care whose name's on the list.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got powerful people on both sides.
Yeah.
I think that's why the Biden DOJ didn't release them, and that's why the Trump DOJ didn't release them. I don't know if, I'm sure there's foreign intelligence involved also. I think that, and you even saw Speaker Mike Johnson say that he was concerned with regards to national security implications. But I think the American people are just tired of being in the dark. They want to know because there's this gap, right? You've got your average folks, and then you've got the elites, right? And that's really what Trump campaigned on, really more of his first term, was that, I mean, if you remember, he said, I want the Republican nomination, but if I don't get it, I'm going to run as an independent.
Yeah.
It was really him versus the system. And we're still seeing that today. Even though Trump is the president, there's still very powerful people that have a lot of sway and influence, and they don't want to be exposed. And there's probably some folks in the administration, and there's some folks that are not in the administration. There's Republicans, there's Democrats. But I think when you get up to that level, it's more fluid, right? I mean, you see all of these folks, regardless of their party, they're all rubbing elbows with one another. They all go to each other's country clubs. They all go play golf with one another, go to dinner with each other. Versus for the average, middle class individual, it seems more partisan. You're either left or you're right. But you get up to that level, and there really is a uniparty. And I think that they're just trying to protect their class, their uniparty, the establishment. And so I think that's what we've seen from the president in regards to the Epstein files. It was the people versus the elites.
That's such a great point. And I'm hopeful that we're going to get, as time goes on, more Americans, more working class people, more everyday people are going to start to realize that it's not left and right, it's more top and bottom. That, we down here at the bottom, regardless of political party, as you correctly stated earlier, that we may have different ways we want to get there, but we all want to pretty much, we all
right.
share the
We've
same
got
goals.
different ideas, but we don't want to see people hurting. We want to see people thriving, doing better for themselves, getting richer, having great access to care. I mean, you'd be a sick individual if you didn't want to see those things.
So have you been disheartened, frustrated by Mike Johnson's delay, distract? I mean, well, it's been the administration all the way down to Mike Johnson. It just seems like they really wanted this to go away.
Yeah.
And it's not going away. I mean, I think Massey's made it really abundantly clear that he's not giving up. And if they redact a lot of these names, it's only going to further fuel this fire and further his initiatives and Green's initiatives. And I'm not sure. I mean, well, I think now it's going to be hard to find a Republican who's not for releasing the Epstein files.
Right. And that was a criticism I have. There's multiple examples, but that's one specific example I can point to as far as Congressman Palmer, who I'm challenging in the primary. He waited for permission from the president. And I don't think we need folks that are not willing to stand up for what's right, even in the face of opposition. Because ultimately it was Massey's bill that passed. And we only saw, I think, 4 Republicans sign on to his discharge petition. And that's already telling right there. The fact that you have to circumvent Republican leadership to even get this bill to the floor, that's really telling. But then, again, you had very little Republican signers. But then as soon as the president says, hey, actually, just vote for the bill. Let's just get this through. He wants to do away with it, tired of it being in the news. It's like 427 to 1. And so this wasn't amended. It was exactly as it had been the whole time. And so I'm sitting here thinking, well, if you're going to almost unanimously vote for this bill with no amendments, why didn't you sign on to the discharge petition? Why didn't you support it before?
Yeah, and there's just so many, I think, areas where people should be asking deeper questions, even really just mulling this stuff over in their head. Like, I mean, because if Trump wanted the files released, they would already be released.
Right, yeah, he doesn't need legislation to do this. I mean, he controls the DOJ. He could do this at any point that he wanted to. But like I said, whether it's wealthy individuals, whether it's donors, whether it's just the establishment, whether it's foreign intelligence, whether it's going to implicate another country, whether it's going to give away trade secrets as far as how we gain intel, I mean, that is not, the American people want to know. They don't care. They don't care who it implicates. They want to know what their government is up to, and they don't want pedophiles being protected by the U.S. government. Regardless, I mean, if we knew what the government was up to as far as, I mean, some of the things that they do in order to gain intel,
Yeah.
I mean, we would be beside ourselves, I think.
Right. Yeah, it would be shocking.
Yeah, and I think we don't care who it implicates or who's in trouble. I personally, I don't believe President Trump is in the files as far as any wrongdoing. I think that maybe they would have, thrown man overboard whenever Biden was president, if he was, just to make sure that Trump didn't become president again. But they didn't. And so I think that right there might tell you that he's probably not implicated, but people he knows is implicated. People that Biden knew is implicated.
Yeah, and it just brings this cloud of suspicion. The more they tried to delay and distract, I think the worse the problem got for them. But I was frustrated because, like, when this whole Diddy thing happened, I was like, oh gosh, yes. Like, that was supposed to expose a lot of people. And then all of a sudden, his trial comes and goes, he gets convicted, and like all these powerful people that were supposedly going to be outed through that, investigation and trial, it just never happened.
Right.
There was a lot of people paying for silence and things like that. It's really frustrating, but it supports your argument. Like, no matter if we're talking about government or technology or the music industry, these people with this elite wealth are doing some really bad stuff.
Yeah.
And the American people's tired of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like what you said earlier. I mean, many times it is top and bottom. Yeah. And we're tired of that dynamic because we're out here struggling while other folks are doing God knows what with our money. And I think that a lot of people are just fed up with that.
Yeah. So just to kind of draw a line in the sand on your position, in case people aren't following, you're not a toe the party line type of guy. You're not a rubber stamper. So if you had already been in Congress, we probably would have seen you standing beside Thomas Massey.
I'd be at the press conference. I'd be on the discharge petition. I mean, that's what I thought we all wanted. Maybe the president himself didn't say it, but I know J.D. Vance did. I know that Trump Jr. did. I mean, that's what really we thought we were getting with Trump, was anti-establishment candidate. Someone that was going to expose the political class, someone that was going to wipe out the elites and bring it back to the people. And that's just not what we're getting.
Yeah. It's the most prominent, the most visible, the most well-known of the Epstein victims is the Virginia who took her own life and had this memoir just recently come out. Man, if just like the first chapter of that book will, it'll just shock you.
Right.
What people go through, what people are going through, how victimized women are.
Right.
How preyed upon they are. It's really sick. All right. So without exceptions, if you were already elected, if you get elected, something like this happens, we're exposing them.
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody gets exposed no matter what. And just so, I get this question all the time. They're like, well, why didn't Biden release the files? Or Clinton's got a much higher probability of being on the list than Trump. I mean, I can't disagree with that. And I would just say that most Democrats want accountability no matter who's on the list. Well, we just want to get this out in the open, get it over with, and see people brought to justice.
Right. With 2 daughters myself, I mean, I can't imagine not prosecuting pedophiles. I mean, to think that Epstein, by himself, trafficked these women with his girlfriend, and no one else was involved, no one else knew what was going on, he never talked to anyone else about it, it was just him, that's incredibly naive. There's other people involved, there's other people implicated, and I'm hoping, honestly, I'm not very optimistic even with the passing of the bill, but I'm hoping that people are brought to justice.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
I want to say something too that I think is really interesting. You see many times, obviously not every time, but many times that a bill is passed and signed into law, there's a little ceremony at the White House. The person that brought the bill forward goes, they take photos, they do a little press conference, so on and so forth. You have a bill that unanimously passed the Senate before it even got there. You have a bill that passed the House 427-1, and yet they don't even have a little, photo op, press conference, whatever it may be. Massey wasn't invited to the White House. I mean, that just goes to show this was a rare example that I think the people actually forced the Speaker's hand, forced Congress's hand, forced the government's hand. And I don't think they like that.
No, I don't. And I love it. So I think it's great. I want to commend Massey. I'm really looking up to him and really proud of the job that he's doing. And, that's the job that you're going to do for Alabamians. I think most people are weary of, they look at folks like you and they're like, all right, he's such a clean slate, but he's going to get into politics. He's going to get corrupted and all these things. Would you just lean on your faith and say, listen, my faith's going to get me through?
I mean, obviously faith is a big part, but I mean, yes, I understand the reservation of people saying, well, how do we know you're not going to be, just like everybody else whenever you get there? And I would say, to see me running, I mean, right now, the way to get elected is to say, I will stand with President Trump no matter what. And so I'd be a complete idiot if, I'm an idiot, I guess, is really what you could say, right? The way I'm running, why would I run saying, hey, I support the president when he's right, but I'm not going to support him when he's wrong? I'll call out corruption, whatever it may be. I mean, that's a dumb way to get elected, I think. And maybe, and I'm hoping it's not. I'm hoping people are waking up and saying, hey, look, actually, this hasn't been how we thought it was going to be. We're looking for someone that's truly going to be anti-establishment, someone that's actually going to push for what the American people want, what the people in the district want. But I think just based off of the campaign already, you can say he's not like the other candidates. He's not like everybody else that's running. Now, as far as, what's going to ensure that I don't get corrupted whenever I get there, I mean, you're just going to have to take me at my word. But right now, it's better than the alternative. I can promise you that.
Well, one thing I would say is that you're pushing. That's the benefit or the side effect of pushing for term limits. Mm-hmm. Let's get in there. Understand that you have if the clock's ticking. There's a lot of research around how athletes perform in the last 2 minutes of the game.
Right.
But if hey, I'm only here for a certain amount of time. I've got a certain amount of time, this window to get things accomplished. I mean, you're just going to be way focused. So in, out before maybe you got time to get a little bit too comfortable, a little too cushy, a little too partisan, yada, yada, yada. I think the strategy of yours is the smart strategy because I do think that people are starting to wake up. I do think this podcast could be very beneficial to that end if people are like, well, let me just, Google what Case is saying, see if he's right on tariffs.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
I mean,
just type it into ChatGPT.
That's all. And I hate to, that's what I really wanted to say is just because with AI, because now people will say oh, AI is woke or this or that. I'm just like, come on. You had even Trump's AI, Elon's AI, backfiring on them and calling them on their stuff. Mm-hmm. So really AI would be just a great place to start. It's going to pull in all the resources, all the track records from both sides and put them together. So, Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up and not me and made that point, because it's such a good point to make. And I don't understand in this information age how somebody could. I mean, that's why people on our side use that word cult. Is like, if you're just not willing, if your head's in the sand so much, you're like, come on. I mean, like, you were die hard. I mean, Charlie Kirk's a prime example. I mean, he was like, we're going to release these files. And then he was like, trying to get everybody to kind of back off.
Yeah, I think I'd seen where he had maybe come out and said, I think his exact quote was, I'm going to trust my friends in the government, which is something I don't think he should ever say.
Right.
But I think towards the tail end, I think he was getting fed up again as well. As, he had trusted them and they weren't following through. But yeah, I think whenever you have blind allegiance to any person, any administration, any party, you're always going to be let down, because, ultimately that's just giving folks way too much power.
Well, I can tell you this with absolute certainty that, like, my wife, like, she's the only, you could be running, this could be your only policy or your only talking point is like, don't trust the government, because that's so her. Mm-hmm. She doesn't trust any of them. She thinks it's all a dumpster fire. And so that would be the way to win her vote. I just think a lot of people are getting there. Mm-hmm. That's why I think it's a smart strategy. All right, so let's wrap this up with a pretty hard contrast between you and Gary Palmer, and kind of see where that shakes out. But in terms of economy, where are you different from him? I think, we've already established that he at one point has been anti-tariff. Now he's at least toeing the line on tariffs.
Right. I think the number one thing that's hurting the economy is our national debt. I think the more that the federal government prints money, the more it devalues our dollars and makes it harder for us to be able to afford things. And Gary campaigned on that as well. Gary talked about the national debt. Since he's been in office, it's doubled, or actually more than doubled. I think at the time that he was running, the national debt per citizen was about $60-something thousand per citizen. Now it's $113,000 per citizen. And the reason why is, whenever we have a Democrat president, it's easy to have cover for increased spending, because you can vote against it, but if the Democrats are in the majority, you're like, well, I voted against it. I voted to not back this budget because it spent too much. But whenever you have someone like President Trump in office, it's harder, because you have to go along with the party many times, even if it's against the best interests. And so now we're seeing that he actually is going to support budgets that increase the deficit, that add to our national debt. And so I think that we need someone, it's kind of like what I talked about earlier, that stands on principle no matter what. And so, for folks that are listening to this podcast, you might think, if you're on the left, you might think, oh, this guy sounds great. This is somebody that's going to oppose President Trump, that's going to stand up to him or stand up to the Republican Party, XYZ. And if you're a Republican watching this podcast, you may think like, dang, this guy sounds like a rhino. But I would encourage you to look at the policies, because, we've not talked about some of maybe my more conservative ideas. And so I would encourage folks to really look and see. And I would just tell you that I'm to the right of the president. I'm to the right of Congressman Palmer. But what that means doesn't mean that I am going to, I feel like people may hear that and they're like, what does that mean? That means I'm going to stand firm on the Constitution. That means I'm going to stand firm on tried and true conservative values. And I think that you'll find that a lot of times it's more like a horseshoe, right?
Yeah.
It's not always,
I totally agree with that.
Here to here. Eventually it comes back around and you're like, actually we have more in common than I realized. And it's like we talked about earlier. We all want the same end goal, right? But it's just a different way of getting there. But I think whenever you phrase it like that, people can appreciate the different viewpoints.
Well, what about if we move on to like healthcare and national security? What have you seen Gary take some stances that would benefit Alabamians or even, U.S. citizens across the board?
Yeah, I think he had talked about a healthcare plan that he had not too long ago. But I would say the biggest difference between me and Gary, just to really hammer it home for folks, is like you said, that I'm not going to rubber stamp whatever the president does. Doesn't matter if it's Republican, Democrat. I'm going to stand up for our liberties and our freedoms no matter what. And you've seen him in the past. Are you familiar with the Section 702 with FISA?
Let's go ahead and, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, with that allows the government to conduct surveillance on American citizens without a warrant. And that's something that conservatives should be opposed to. Maybe, I mean, really everyone should be opposed to it, really, should I say. I think that we shouldn't give more power to the government. But what you see is that whenever the party says, hey, vote this way, he votes that way. And so whenever that was sunsetting, the Section 702 was going to sunset, the government was no longer going to be able to spy on Americans without warrants. They put it into a big bill to re-up it for so many years, and they put a pay raise for soldiers in there. And so you see him, he votes for it under the cover of a pay raise for soldiers. And folks ask him, well, why did you vote for that? Well, I couldn't vote against a pay raise for soldiers. But yet you have other folks like J.D. Vance, who's a military veteran, and he voted against it at that time because it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. It goes against the Constitution. And so you need folks that stand firm on conservative values, on the Constitution, on even just their beliefs, no matter what. And if you look at Gary's voting record, he's not done that. He's voted for bigger government. He's voted to, speaking about the cannabis earlier, he voted to maintain cannabis at a Schedule I substance at the federal level. That takes away power from the states. That's not conservative. He's voted for increased spending. That's not conservative. He's not said anything about the wars. He's not said anything about the Epstein files. I mean, when you look at all of these things, you say, it's hard to pin down, I guess, specific policies, but when you look and see, he's just going along to get along. He's not someone that's going to actually be an independent voice and someone that's going to be a voice for the people of Alabama.
Yeah, I would just, say this. In that line of thinking, I mean, because you're already showing it in the way you're running your campaign, that you're willing to risk alienating voters who believe that you should, or Gary Palmer should rubber stamp everything that Trump says or does or initiates. Right. So I would say the proof's in the pudding already.
Right.
In terms of what you're willing to put on the line. And I just think it's important for people to respect where that comes from and how that ultimately will impact them in the long run.
Right.
But it's also, I think, really good to, define conservatism. Mm-hmm. And I think you've done that in a really strong way, and really kind of hammered out what's conservative and what's not, because people may think, oh, it's a conservative to do this, but in reality, it's not. And maybe people really need to take a look at what it means to be a conservative, and if they consider themselves a conservative, then that would really help them kind of process of elimination, come up with who the right person to vote for. Do you have a pledge to like working class voters, or any policy you want to talk about in terms of working class voters, but maybe it's a pledge that Gary Palmer hasn't made or he hasn't kept to working class voters?
Sure. Well, speaking of pledges that he hasn't kept, if folks remember, when he ran in 2014, he vowed that he would only serve 10 years in Congress. And that's been 12 years ago. And now he's shooting for 14 years. So, I mean, that's not enough to get me off the couch to run against somebody, but I think that's important to highlight. I mean, we need folks that stand firm on their word, right? We need folks that really mean what they say. But a pledge that I'm willing to make, one that I want folks to know where I stand, is that I will defend the Constitution, I will stand up for Christian values, and I will defend our liberties and freedoms that we have in this country, no matter what. It doesn't matter who the president is. I will say, if it's a Republican president, Democrat president, doesn't matter. Like you said, it's calling balls and strikes. It is what it is, and we need folks that say it how it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like in my business, right? In real estate, the number one thing our consumers want is truth. They want honesty. Mm-hmm. They want brutal honesty, or they say they do. And then, like if you were a seller and I was meeting with you and you asked me the price, if I say a price, this has happened to me many times. I've been doing this over 20 years. If I say the price you don't want to hear, I'm immediately out, right? And it seems like that's the case in politics all the time. It's like, I felt like there were better Republican candidates running in 2024. I wanted to see them get a shot, and they just didn't. Because I was prepared, because there were many reasons, but Biden too said he was going to be a one-term guy and didn't do it. I guess these people just get addicted to the power or the notoriety, or just feeling important, that they just got to stay in. Because my stepdad's passed away now, but he was a Republican, spent many decades in the state house, and I was just like, man, he ended up dying still working, and talk about a guy who loves to fish, just never really got to enjoy retirement.
Right.
It blows my mind. I appreciate you coming on and doing this.
Absolutely.
I know a lot of people do this. They say they're going to be, they're going to stick to the script, and they're going to not be controversial or edgy or blindside you, and they do. And so you took a big risk. Come on, not a big risk, because the podcast is not live. But if we've been Facebook Live or YouTube Live, a lot of times that's when they do it. But still,
sure.
To be open to this conversation, I hope it opens to more doors for me in terms of talking to Republicans, and maybe for you being on more democratically aligned podcasts or programs or anything like that. But
right.
I wish you the best.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Absolutely.
I think you are
I would encourage
fine American.
Well, thank you. I would encourage all the listeners to go to DixonForUSCongress.com. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all the social medias. If you're a Republican and you think, dang, this guy sounds like a rhino, please go look at my policies. They're the most. I have branded myself as the most conservative candidate in the race, and I really do mean that. But if you're a Democrat, or maybe a swing voter, if you want someone that at least you know where they stand, I'm your guy, because I'm going to be straight up and honest with you. We might not see eye to eye, but I'm not going to just go with the flow. And so I think that some folks could appreciate that.
I think they should appreciate that. I mean, even because the label thing just gets me. The dino, the rhino, it's like, go to one of your events, hear you speak in person, or, to a group, or get to have a one-on-one conversation with you, get to know you and not just rush to judgment. A big thing that I think would really help us all as a society is curiosity over judgment. So just be inherently curious and dig deeper on some of these issues. I think the more they dig in terms of the 6th district, the more they'll find hey, maybe there is a better choice. Mm-hmm. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. That website, it's worth going just to see how nice it is. It's so nice. But it was so good having you.
Yeah.
Who knows? You may see me on the campaign trail at one of your events. You never know.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Politics of fear and hate are wrong. We love you and we support you.
But America,
Love are right.
we are not going back.